All right, welcome back. We are Game 3004, that's Mobile Game Dev 2, in the winter 2022 semester at George Brown, and it's week 11, part 2 of our broadcast and recording. Hey, Michael, how you doing? Welcome. And welcome everyone here. Herman, I'm seeing you again, Liam and Mandeep. Okay, let's do this again. So yeah, let's get into this. So we left off. We kind of did a little bit of exploration on organic character, the organic character creation process. We talked about what organic means. It means like using things like voxel painting or voxel sculpting, those kind of things to create stuff. We explored some really interesting things with Blender. Again, we didn't make our own model, but we talked about some of the challenges around it, how to texture paint, how to sculpt and those kind of things. Blender, again, we know is not the best tool for this kind of thing. It can do it, but it's not meant for it. Other better tools we talked about are things like we said, ZBrush, or even something like 3D Coat that has voxels that are in the millions, not or in the hundreds of thousands, as opposed to a small amount of quads that we used in Blender. Okay, so that's not where we want to go. We want to start very, very high poly, and then we want to work down or retopologize to go low poly, and then do the other stuff. The rigging and everything else can be done in Blender. But typically, Blender's not that creation tool. It's not like it's never going to be there. I think they've really improved the sculpting tools compared to the original version of Blender that I was using. But still, there's a lot of work to do, and there's a long way to go in terms of making it something that's comparable to ZBrush or something like 3D Coat. All right, so that's what we learned. So what I want to do today is I want to use Mixamo to create a prototype character for our game. But I know that you guys have used the character creation process by selecting a character, and we're going to try and upload a character to Mixamo instead. And what I've done for you guys is up on Blackboard inside of our labs area, inside of our Lab 7 assets, what I've done is a couple things. I've included this Liftoff character. Again, I was using them for another superhero project I was working on in the past. So that's the character itself. Let's use the character from our sandbox as I make our new project. So again, what we want to start off with is the project that we worked on last time and just continue from there. So again, I'm going to go to Desktop, and I'm going to go to GBC and Game 3004. And you guys are section 401. And I'm going to go and make a brand new project called Game 3004 Winter 2022 Lab 7. There we go. Here's Lab 7. I'm going to grab everything from here except for the library builds and any other extra folder that we don't need. Copy those. I'm going to go back in here and paste it into Lab 7. So let's continue from there. And again, for those people watching online, you can go to github.com/George Brown College, and you're going to see that there is a Game 3004 section 400, which is what we're doing when we're putting up this lab. Right now, there's only Lab 6, but we're going to put up Lab 7 in a second. All right, so that's where we're starting. Once we've done that, I'm going to go into here on GitHub, Unity Hub, and I'm going to open up Lab 7. Again, that's going to be up on the desktop. So I'm going to go into GBC, and I'm going to go into 3004, section 401, Lab 7, and then I'm going to open that up. In the meantime, while I'm doing that, let's open up Blender. So I'm going to open up Blender as an administrator. Can I do it? Is it going to let me today? Maybe multiple times. How about that? That's not good. All right. Let's see what's going to happen. It's going to take its time. Loading Blender. Probably going to load after Unity. And what I want to do is I want to grab that. I've created a sandbox for today where we can have some of our files that we've downloaded. So here's our Game 3004 Week 11 sandbox, and I have my Liftoff character that I'm going to use in a second. Okay, I also tried Robot Kyle. I don't think he really worked well, and that's why I didn't go with him. I thought the other character was better. Okay, one day when Blender decides to open, or even Unity, we'll go from there. How about that? So again, we talked about different tools. There we go. There's Blender. We talked about different tools, and we said that creating in Blender great when it comes to hard surface modeling. Organic, not so much, but it's great for things like rigging. That's really great. Let's import the model that's on that's on Blackboard. So I'm going to go import FBX. I'm going to go into my downloads folder inside of my GAME3004 week 11. I'm going to grab Liftoff FBX and import them. And there they are. All right, notice that there are two parts to the model. There's the head and there's the body, right? And what we want to do is, let's undo those changes. There we go. So that the body is pretty good. So notice that the head is made up of hair as well as the head, the face, and the head itself, right? And then there's the body. And what if you look in the kind of in rendered mode, you can see what it's going to look like. Okay. So this is the model we want to look at. It's pretty scary looking because I find that the stare is pretty intense, right? Right. And that's the model we're going to use. Now, one of the things is the model is coming in A pose, and I couldn't really find a model that made sense that I liked that was in T pose, but typically when we go up in Mixamo, we want to put it up in T pose instead of A pose. So this is the model we're using right now. One thing to note is from a materials perspective, you can see that there are several textures. The material has a modern 2 PNG that's covering the head and the hair. And also in the body, it has a female base material, right, for the base. That's what they called it. I'm going to obviously rename this stuff to make it for what it is. We're just going to call it Liftoff. We don't care male or female. All right, so that's it. I just wanted to inspect the model with you. And what I want to do is, still while Unity is opening, let's go up to Mixamo. And we're going to do some work in there. So up on Mixamo, here's our model, but I want to upload it with you again one more time. So I'm going to go to Upload Character, and we're going to go to our sandbox, right, where you downloaded from Blackboard, and we're going to pass our liftoff.fbx inside there. It's going to open up the load screen, right, where it's going to take us to Auto Rigger. The Auto Rigger, what it's asking for is for best results, we should have our character in T-pose with the fingers spread apart, okay? And it says use the arrow buttons to rotate your character and have its front face forward like this, okay? Next. After we do that, what we want to do is we want to set these waypoints, right? And these waypoints, or markers, if you will, are going to help Mixamo kind of create the rig for you instead of you doing it by yourself. So I'm going to take the chin. I'm going to go all the way up to the center line, and just above the center line where the chin is right here. That's where the chin is going to be. Notice that it also covers the mouth. Make sure that your circle here also covers the mouth, just like this covers the mouth. It's important to do that. Next, I'm going to take the left wrist, right? And again, if you look at the left wrist, and I'm going to put it over on the left side. So I'm going to kind of target the left side. Again, take a look at where you're targeting and what they're showing you. It should cover part of mostly on the actual object itself. Take a look at the circle, right? The little mini map shows you where it is, but the circle basically shows you where it's going to be. And it should, it's hard to see this because the map is small, but for the most part, it's going to be right where the left wrist should be. The left elbow is a little bit more difficult. Again, I find that is hard to do. Even when the model's in T-pose, you want to target approximately where you think the left elbow is going to be. All right, so something like in there. That's kind of like the inner elbow is what we're looking at. That's why it's, again, why they suggest that you put it in T-pose. And finally, the knees. I'm going to put the left knee. This is kind of easy to do. This is the left knee. And that's the right knee. Let's make sure it's in the right spot. Finally, the groin, right? So this is the groin. We're going to move that up to kind of a little bit above that area right there, and it should cover the whole groin, should be in the entire model. So the circle should be on the model. It should be not off the model. This will help a lot when it comes to the way it's connecting the legs and everything else. Okay, after you've done this, we press next. We're going to keep the same standard skeleton of bones, 65 bones, because we want to use the fingers. Next, it's going to do its auto rigging. R left. It's going to do our auto rigging now. And as it continues to do its auto rigging, we're going to check to see if there's issues. If there's issues, we're not going to accept it and we're going to do it again. That's the thing we want to do, because if we do it and there's issues from this model, that would be very bad. Okay, so let's take a look. So when I say there's issues, you want to zoom in as much as possible and start looking at the model if there's any tearing. And this model is not the best. We can tell because take a look at that neck right there. So the neck there's tearing around the neck, and that tearing means that if there's some geometry there that needs to be adjusted for the way that the rig is set up. So theoretically, you can get this rig, bring it back into Blender and modify, tweak it a little bit so it's better than what it is right now. But for the most part, it's okay. You can also look at the rig itself, what that looks like. There's the bones that have been created for us. Okay, so you can see that you've got one bone for the head, and you've got a bone for the neck and the rest of the spine. That's how it connects everything, everything is connected together. All right, so that's skeleton view. I think I'm going to accept this guy and click next. But the rest of it looks pretty good. Okay, so it looks pretty good. There's no tearing anywhere else in the entire mesh, just the neck. So now that we have that, yeah, symmetry is true. Standard skeleton 65, yep. Now that you have that, you can see that our character is in A pose, and this is okay, but we want to find T pose. So the first thing I want to do is in the animations part, let's find T pose. And there is a T pose that they've given you. It's a scarecrow. And what it'll do is it'll put your character in T pose for you. There's your character in T pose. So this is pretty good. Again, and what you want to do is save this right now inside of your, inside of your project. So here's our project, right, that we've kind of put up. I'm just going to go into the main scene to bring up our main scene. This is from last day. Here we are. And if we have our bonfire, let's just remove that for now because we're not going to use it for today. But what I want to do is wherever the player is, which is here, I want to add in the character right here. This is where they're going to go. And what I want to do is I want to add the character into the models folder. So in this models folder right here. Okay. So that means if I go back to Mixamo, then I want to download this. I want to keep FBX, but I want to choose FBX for Unity. That's an option, right? Frames per second, we'll keep it at 30. That's good enough. With skin, it's fine. No frame reduction. We'll click on download and we'll put it inside of the right spot for where it's supposed to go. So it's going to tell us where. I'm going to go into section 401 and put it into lab 7, into assets, and into models. And this is where the first thing is going to go. The Liftoff, that's what the character's name is. T-pose, what it's going to go. And we're just going to call this T-pose. And the T-pose is going to be our main pose. We're going to get the design for the bones, the structure, and everything else. Let's put that in there. Save. Okay, next. We need a few more. We need an idle, right? Let's get an idle pose. Okay, and I've given you some online. An idle pose, as an example, there's a couple of really good ones. I think this one is probably the one that I used. They're the same one. So this is our idle pose, right? For the idle pose, what you want to do is you want to change the character arm spacing just a little bit more so that it doesn't hug the body. Remember, the character's wearing armor, and if the armor is penetrating the body when they're doing their, their, like right here, see where that's penetrating? The idle, you don't want that to happen. So let's move it a little bit more until it doesn't rub against the armor as much as possible. Again, by the way, AAA games do this anyway. When they do T-pose, or when they do idle, they kind of, sometimes their arm passes through a cloak. Here, even the latest Elden Ring does that, where the cloak itself is waving through the shield or whatever. I mean, it is what it is. It's not going to be perfect, but it's not terrible either. We also see in in idle mode that some issues are happening with the chest area as well. Some areas here that the chest is deforming because the way that we did our rig is not perfect for the chest, for this whole area. But that's okay. Let's save this. So download. Okay, again, Unity for FBX. We're going to call this the idle, right, for the character. It's going to do it for you when it feels like it. We're going to put that Liftoff idle in the same spot in the models. Okay, we need some kind of walk animation now. So we'll do a walk animation. And again, we'll just choose a regular walk animation. This one seems fine. First one that I'm seeing. I want them to walk in place, right? And again, what we want to be cognizant of or really careful, sensitive to, is this, that the arms don't go through the body like that's doing it right now. So let's change the character arm spacing again to about 60 something so that we don't see this kind of stuff happening even more for this one, because the character arms, you know, in real life, they wouldn't go through the body, right? So we want that to happen. Make sure that it's not happening. Check to see that that's not going on. And this is pretty good in terms of a walk, right? So download. Same settings. Yep. And then once I have that, I want to do some kind of attack pose, right? So again, we'll look at a punch. And there's different kinds of punches. Earlier today, I used a kind of a hook punch, right, as an example. And this isn't bad. That's what I'm going to use again, hook punch, right? And again, think about the character spacing, the arm spacing. Look at the back, right? When they're is that it doesn't look right for you, as an example. So let's make the arm spacing a little bit more. We'll put it out to about 60 again. That seems to be about right for this character, right? So that their arms aren't rubbing against their own chest or going through their armor. That doesn't make sense. And we probably want to use overdrive a little bit because this punch is really slow. So let's make it so it's like, again, something like 60. So it's up and it's just fighting you. It's just punching against you, right? There we go. And that's the last one we're going to get. Just those three is enough. Let's do that. So download. And we're going to put it in the same spot. Cool. Excellent. Let's stop this thing. And one thing we can also do before we go actually is take a look at what's actually happening in the rig. So the rig is interesting. Again, it's what's happened is they've done performance capture here for us, and the rig is based on some performance capture that an actor actually did, or some animation that's been pre-done for us, which is neat. You can see there's a lot of stuff going on to make the action look very, very realistic. Okay, so pretty cool. All right, so we're just stopping this because I don't want to go on. Again, you can see that there's issues. There's issues here. There's issues in the chest, in the arms, because the arm is bending like as if it doesn't have, you know, that it can kind of bend the armor, which doesn't really make sense. The armor shouldn't be bending. And if we were going to change this in Blender, we would make it so that it has very little influence in terms of how much it's going to deform the armor. It will deform the arm, it will bend the arm, but the armor itself is not something that I would deform. Okay, so it'd have less influence on that. So again, great for prototyping, not great if you're using your own model for something that you want to use long term. All right, let's get back into Unity now. So now that we have our models in Unity, I want to bring that T-pose model into the scene. Let's do that first. So here's our T-pose model. And what I want to do is, let's kind of zoom out here and go to this. Okay. A couple things to prepare that we're going to need is I want to turn off our layers for eventually for our markers. We're not going to do it now because I'm going to add an enemy marker to this guy too. But for the beginning, what I want to do is I want to go into Liftoff T-pose, which is what we've added in, right? And let's go into the model. And inside the model, we're going to read write, click that on, and then also generate light map UVs like we've done in the past and click apply. So that's going to be the first thing we do. Next, I want to skip rig and animation and go right to materials. And in my materials, I want to extract my materials into the right material folder. Select. In the materials folder now, you're going to see a couple of materials, a head material, and a liftoff body. So again, each piece of the material is going to be in different spots, right? So let's go with the head material and let's see what that is. So the head material itself, let's add in the texture. We don't have textures in here right now, but what I've done is then again up on Blender, up on Blackboard, you can see that I've given you all the textures here, Liftoff textures. Please download those too if you haven't done it already. And what I'm going to do is drag and drop these textures inside of our Unity. So drag and drop both those textures. I'm going to grab the Modern 2 as well as the Liftoff base and put it in there. Okay, and what I want to do now is I want to use the first thing. So if I want to go to the materials, if I go to the head, I want to drag and drop Modern 2 in there. So Modern 2 is the one that it uses. And that's the hair. So we know that this, where it says head material, that's the hair material. Liftoff hair. Let's change that name. So, okay, head is rename. We'll call it Liftoff hair material. Okay, that's what that is. And the head material we'll rename to Liftoff head material. And again, we'll take that same texture, which is Modern 2, and drag it across to the base material so we get that face in there. Okay, cool. And then finally, on the Liftoff body, we'll call this the Liftoff body material. Liftoff body material. And we'll grab the other texture, which is the Liftoff female base material. We're going to change that name in a second to the base. So we have our base material inside there. Let's change these names. So Modern 2, that'll be the head texture. And that's the Liftoff head texture, Liftoff head texture. And then this will be the Liftoff body texture. Okay. Now, some stuff to note in terms of materials. Where we want to go in here is we want to look at the Liftoff head material or the hair material, and you can clearly see that this is way too shiny. That doesn't look like hair. It looks like he's made of plastic, right? So we can change that by going into the material, which is part of the universal render pipeline now, and let's reduce the smoothness down to 0. So now that's a little rougher. Okay. Again, that heavy looks heavy. Yeah, I know. It's pretty crazy. So that is the head. Let's do the same thing for the hair. Let's do the same thing for the head. We don't want the head to be shiny. That's really shiny. That's not shiny. Okay. And now for the armor. Okay, this is where you can. I mean, it's pretty cheesy what they've done here. It's very badly painted, especially up here. It doesn't look right. But we can certainly go in later on and fix it, right? If you really wanted to. Because again, the material is pretty wacky, right? But that's okay. What we want to do is we want to actually, this is where the material, maybe you want to make it shinier than this because this is kind of a shiny armor. It's up to you. But the body material can actually be a little shinier than what it is. So kind of a shiny material to make it look like it's as if it's something to do, it's like metallic, okay? We don't have a metallic map, but we can definitely make it more metallic looking. And the more we go towards the 1, we become super shiny and reflective. So be careful about this when you do that. So if you're going to use any, use a small amount. So it's kind of shiny material in the back. Okay, not terribly bad so far. Things that are missing. We don't have a normal map. It'd be nice if you had a normal map for the armor. That'd be great. You know, there's a lot of stuff that we could probably do to make this a little nicer. And but this for us is probably okay because you know what? It's an organic model that's been sculpted for us. We can also try in the pipeline. So the universal render pipeline comes with different options. So if I look at the liftoff body, it comes with lit. We can also go and change to Autodesk Interactive. And if you go Autodesk Interactive instead of that, right, again, you can see that that is not right. But it looks very, very like super shiny at this point. And again, you'd have to drive down the metallic amount way down, right, to 0, if you're going to go there at all. It looks like he's wearing like white blimpy armor, right? And we're missing a lot of stuff, right? So we want to use the color map. That's what we want there, okay? And just by itself, it looks a little better in some ways. But again, one of the things that I don't like about it is the way that it shines up. If we add more metallic to it, right, you can see that it probably looks a little better than what it was. So the more metallic you add in there, that's cool. You can also add roughness, which will make it take away some of the shine, right? So there's a lot more control with the Autodesk Interactive, kind of shader that we can use. We can certainly use, kind of we don't have an ambient occlusion map or anything like that, or a normal map. That would be nice to have, but we don't have that, and this is probably going to be the best we can get for the armor. All right, pretty cool. That's where we're going to stick to. I'm not going to go more than this at this point. Let's save the scene. Okay, we're saving the scene here. And I've got the model in place, and I've got all of my stuff in place. I think this is a great place to put this up on GitHub. So I'm going to File, Save Project, and let's exit and put this up on GitHub. So again, just like before, we're going to go to 3004, section 1, 401. We're going to say added project files for lab 7. And a couple other things. And let's push that. So now if you download the project from GitHub, then it should be no problem. And again, for those people watching online, what I'll do is I'll just grab this big repository, which includes all of them, all the labs, including lab 7 right now. Let's grab this one, and for those people watching, let's pop it onto YouTube for you guys, as well as for those people that are here. No, you don't want smoothness for the head, that's for sure. No. Roughness, but not smoothness. Roughness will make it more matte looking. All right, let's go back into GAME3004 Lab 7, and we'll go from there. So now that we have our character, and this is good, right? We want to add some animations, and we want to test them too. So there's our character. They look okay so far. Oh, also notice that one thing, that gravel cobble material looks like crazy shiny. I don't know if you noticed that last time, guys, but that's just a side effect of what I've seen. So just because we're there, gravel cobble material, like, okay, but it would be really nice if we used a normal map for this. Do we have a normal map for our texture for gravel cobble? I think we did at some point, but we got rid of it. Remember that you can always make a texture of your own, normal map texture. You can try it. Sometimes it'll work. Where you can take the gravel cobble texture and Control D to duplicate it and just rename it to, let's say, _N for normal map. And what you can do is in the gravel cobble, just giving an example of the material, gravel cobble ground material, you can try and pull in the normal map in there, in the normal itself, fix it. And then when we do that, we could use normal map. Now it's pretty shiny. You can see that that is producing a very shiny effect, right? But then what you can do is you should be able to turn that down a lot. Unfortunately, you cannot. Once you put the normal map in there, it is what it is. It looks like really, really shiny material. So there's not a lot of kind of effect. Now, this is in the Autodesk Interactive version, but however, what you could do is, again, Universal Pipeline, we could move out from there and go to the lit version, right, where we have our normal map that's in play. There it is, right? But we could turn it down. We don't have to make it so that it's like, 1. We can go with something like 0.15 to give it a little bit of a bump, but not a crazy amount, right? Because otherwise it'll look too raw. And we don't want it shiny at all. So we want that smoothness to go right down to like very little, if anything at all. So maybe it's a little bit of smoothness off the stones, but not much, right? So that's kind of a better way of looking at it compared to what we had before, okay? All right, I just looked at the ground. That's all I changed. If we try to do the same thing, though, for the armor, you're going to notice it's not going to work. So please don't try the armor. You're going to see you won't have success like we just did with our normal map. And we don't even know what it's going to look like on mobile. That normal map may be something we need to remove. Okay. Next, for the actual object itself. So back to models. So now that we have our object, we want to add some animations and all those things. Like before, guys, I highly recommend for the model itself, we add in a parent model. So go into create empty parent, and I'll just call this thing Liftoff. I believe it solves a lot of issues, when it comes to Unity. When you kind of wrap your model that you're bringing in from Blender or someplace else in an empty parent. Okay, that's something that I want to do. Next, I want to talk about animations. And all of these hook, punch, T-pose, and walking has a bunch of animations. So what I want to do is I want to apply the animations to the model itself where it says T-pose, that part. That model is going to be the Liftoff body. That is that model right now. The Liftoff body is going to be this part, whatever it was called before, okay? And I want to apply the animation there. So I want to go into idle. Let's do idle first. And I want to grab the idle clip, and I want you to Control D the idle clip until you have a copy. And then I want you to go into the Liftoff body and drag and drop the idle clip onto the body. And it's going to create a little animator called Liftoff body. Let's just rename that to Liftoff Animator Controller. We're going to move this in a second. Bear with me. But that idle animation, which is right here now, is something that we have access to. So we can click, kind of check that on as loop time. Let's do the other ones. So let's do, and by the way, if I was to, use the Liftoff body itself to use as an example. So here's the Liftoff body, right? This is the one we used. I just dragged and dropped this in there. And if I press play, well, we would expect to see the animation in there, but unfortunately, idle isn't going to do it for us. Why? Because we haven't selected an avatar, right? We haven't done that. And if you try and do that in like something like a Unity model, it's also going to be, well, failing to give us a preview. So that's not going to work. We can also select a prefab for this, like for example, something like idle, which is okay. We can do that. And then we can try the idle animation out, and we can preview what it's going to look like. You can see that that's going to work. Okay, so that idle, even though we pulled it out, is going to work, which means that we don't need this thing. We don't need idle. We don't need that anymore. We can get rid of it. Goodbye. Delete. And we can do the same thing for T-pose. Well, so T-pose we need. The same thing for hook punch. So hook punch, let's Control D and get a hook punch. Then we can get rid of it. Goodbye. And same thing with walking. So we go to walking. We can click on the animation, the clip. Control D. We get the walking animation. Now we don't need this one anymore. So why am I getting rid of them? Because they take up a lot of space, as an example, and you don't need them. All you need is just the ones, the clips. So let's grab all of these clips and the animator controller, and let's pull these into our animations folder. And in the animations folder, let's just reorganize a little bit. I'm going to make a folder for Liftoff. Maybe I can spell properly one day. And let's take walking, idle, hook punch, and Liftoff Animator controller and drag and drop it in there. And then we'll make one for hazard. Do the same thing. And coin. Always nice to be organized. All right, cool. Let's go back into that hazard animator controller and take a look at it. So, oops, I mean the, wow, I meant, I love it. The Liftoff Animator controller, and take a look at that. Come on, this one. You can see that there's an idle. We also want to make sure that walking is loop time and punching is loop time. We want to make sure that that's true. Again, we can choose another model for our example. So we can, whenever we want to look at hook punch as an example, we can see what this looks like. Okay. And the same thing goes with our idle or our walking. Okay. And you can turn up the speed if you want. Pretty cool. So you can see that those all are working. And what I want to do, just like normal, is here in the parameters, I want to add an integer parameter. Lots of ways to do this. I'm going to call this animation state. And we're going to start off at 0. And I'm going to set the idle to 0. And I'm going to bring in the other clips. So we're going to have idle, walking, and hook punch. And I'm going to make connections just like we've done before to each one of them. Erg. It's not what I wanted. Thank you. Okay. And then when we move from one to the other, we don't want any exit time. And we want to also select a state. So we're going to say if it's equal to 1, we've done this before, nothing new. If it equals to 2, no exit time. If it equals to 3, 0. If it equals, going back to this one, make sure there's no exit time. If it equals to 2, if it equals to 1, and if it equals to 0. Okay. Again, check them. Just make sure we don't have exit time on any of them. You don't want that. I'm not even going to fix the blending at this point. I'm going to leave them as is. Okay, just as is. I'm just doing this as a to show you the animation states. Those are the states. 0, 1, 2. We've done this kind of stuff before. Nothing new here. I want to test them. And right now, in the liftoff model, I have the liftoff body, and I'm going to check the animation states here, right? So a couple things. I want to add the, when I do the animation states, I want to move with the animation. So let's add the component here, which is going to be a brand new script. We're going to call this the Liftoff Animator. And the Liftoff Animator is going to be put on the Liftoff body with where the animator controller is. This one. And what we're going to do is we're going to test it. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to get a reference to the animator. So again, Liftoff Animator, I want a reference. We'll make it private. We'll call this the animator. And you know, because we're getting an animator, let's do require component. So we'll say require component type of animator. And we'll say that we can't do this script, we can't attach this script unless there's an animator attached. So we know there's an animator attached. And we're going to say that animator, when Visual Studio decides to release me from its grasp, animator, come on, is equal to get components animator. And then what I want to do is to test this thing out, I'm going to use a series of if statements. I'm going to say if inputs dot get key down is key code alpha 1. That's the 1 key. Then I want to test this out. I want to say that animator dot set integer animation state to 0. And this will be our idle state, idle tests, right? And we'll do a couple more of these for now, just to test that we can go from one state to the other state, right? So this will be alpha 2. So the 2 button and the 3 button will give us to the 1 state and the 2 state. The 1 state is a walk, and the other one is a punch. These are the different things we can do. So just testing to see if all this works with the animator. Okay, going back out, and let's try it out and see if it works. So run, and we should see by default that we're in idle mode. Okay, there it is. And if I choose the 1 button or the 2 button, it should go into walk state. And if I go the 3 button, it should try and punch. And if you look and see what that looks like, it kind of looks like this. So it's kind of can be pretty scary looking. Okay. All right, so that's what it's going to look like. That's the animation. Let's file, save project, and let's put this up on GitHub. So we're just going to exit, and we're going to go back to GitHub, and we're going to say added animations. Main and push to origin. So I'm not sure if you guys knew that you could get rid of the other models. Hopefully you did. You don't need those. It's just the animation clips that you need. Okay. And that saves you a lot of memory, a lot of storage space too. Now you got to figure that my storage space is really low because my textures are very small, right? And what happened? Liam, did it work for you or no? Or did it break? Is on the floor. That's why I used a, like I said, that's why I kind of used a wrapper for them so that the lift off bodies inside of the other thing, it should work for you. No, we didn't change anything. We didn't change anything. All right, so that is the model. But you know what? He's going to punch, and I want his punch to do damage to me, right? So I have no, none of this has any kind of collider. I want to add a collider to the model. And I'm doing this in kind of reverse order a little bit. Last time what I did was I put the collider on first. This time I did the animation first. Let's add the collider on first. Now, okay, so what I want to do for the collider, a lot of times what I do is I add a separate object, another 3D object, let's suppose a capsule object. Yes, there's the capsule. And what you can do is you can adjust the capsule so that it is aligned with the character model, right? Now it's way too big. You can see that the capsule is not quite on its head or whatever for the collider itself. There's a capsule collider. Let's change its proportions. So again, what we want to say is like the radius is 0.5. Let's make it so it's like 0.25, right? And in order for us to do it so we can see what it looks like, let's cut the scale in half. Okay. And we can clearly see that this is okay. Okay, so if I turn off the mesh renderer, you can see that the model at least in T-pose is good to go. Okay. Now you don't have to make it so thin, but we're going to add other colliders everywhere else. We don't want to be able to pass through the body of the character. That's what we don't want. Okay. So this body is going, this collider is going to work mostly with where the legs are. Theoretically, because the legs are moving, you could make this capsule collider only in its chest and the head. You could do that because that's not going to change too much. But you got to be careful with colliders in general. All right, so for now, we're just going to leave this capsule collider in place like this. It's kind of pretty good, and it will stop us from moving through it. But what about the colliders for the hands? If the hands are going to hit me, we can't put the collider on the body. We have to put the collider on the bones. And this is the next thing that we want to do. So here's the capsule collider. We'll call this the collider, the body collider. We'll have that in place there. It's a separate component that we can turn off and on, and we can get to whenever we feel like. I don't have to search around, and I can use a capsule collider to size things the way I want to. Even if I want to change this or make it in half or do whatever, I can do other things in there. And this is when the body's in idle. It's kind of a good test to see what it's looking like. Next, I want to go into the body itself and into the bones. These are the bones. Please don't rename anything here, okay? And I want to go into the spine and into the left shoulder, right? So here's the left shoulder. And inside the left shoulder, you can see that there's the arm. And inside the arm, there's the left forearm. And finally, you get into the left hand. What I want to do here is I want to add another empty or another 3D object, cube. Let's do a cube. You can see it's pretty massive, but don't worry about it. And we're going to call this is the left hand collider. So let's rename it left hand collider. Okay. I want to reduce the size of this a lot. Let's make it so it's like 0.25 wide and 0.25 tall, right? Actually, let's just make that 0.5, maybe it might be better. There we go. We'll adjust that in a second, and 0.25 the other way. So something like this, okay? You can make additional adjustments because what we're going to do now is we're going to use the, our little rec tool just to come down even more. So we want to just say, so just so we see the top of the arm, like so, right? And the same thing goes for this. We just want to kind of bring this in so that way we only see part of the arm like this. Obviously, it's kind of twisted. We need to align it a little better than what it is aligned right now. But for now, what we're going to do is try and bring it in so that it is as tight as possible to the body, something like that. Same thing from the bottom, right? Or it's not too much, or we don't need it. Again, we don't have to be super accurate here because at the end of the day, it's going to be a way of us punching the character. Now, this is taking up the forearm, not just the hand. And so we want to make it so that the whole hand is covered, something like this. And same thing with the forearm. Let's bring it so that only the hand has the collider. Okay, cool. So now that we have that, let's rotate it. And remember, we want to rotate it in the right orientation, not this way, obviously, but something like, across the Z, so that's aligned with at least the forearm. Okay. And then we can take a look and see what that happens. We want to be able to see the top of the hand. There we go. And what I want is for the, let's turn off the mesh renderer and let's see what that looks like. So that is the collider. Okay, so that thing is going to be like a club to us when it kind of hits us in the head. And that's going to move along with the bones. Now, I want to copy this thing and I want to put it on the other side. But the thing is, we have to be cognizant of the fact that some of these numbers are going to be different for the other side. One of them is the rotation, which is like let's say minus 11, just to make it even, minus 11. The scale, though, is something that we will want to capture, but the position is going to be something totally different. Okay, position is not going to be something we can capture for the most part because it's going to be reversed of what it's over here on the hand, right, on the left hand. So that's the left hand collider. We'll come back to this. Let's go back to the right shoulder, the right arm, and let's go back to the right hand. And in the right hand itself, I want to add another cube. So again, we're going to take some, now that we have one, we can do the other one. So I'm going to go into 3D Object Cube. We don't need to see the cube anymore because we know what's going to happen to it, right? And we know the proportions. I'm going to grab, let's rename this thing so it's going to be right hand collider. And I'm going to grab the left hand collider. I can go here and I can go copy the scale. And I'm going to go back to the right hand and I'm going to go paste the scale. So now you can see the scale is where it's at. And I want to go, instead of the Z being 0, it's going to be 11. So it's kind of like the opposite of what we had before. Now the position isn't quite right because notice that the position on the left hand is here and the position on the right hand, well, it's a little bit too over. It has to be over this way a little bit. So we could try and position it manually as much as possible. So somehow so that it takes up most of the hand like so. And again, we can compare it. Minus 0.065. Here we have minus 0.15 and 79, right? So it is different. And what you want to check out is it's around the same size, but this goes almost to the tips and this doesn't. Again, it's not quite symmetrical. And then we can see what the numbers look like. And the numbers are starting to look the same, right? So we can grab those two. We can say that let's copy the position, and let's go back to the right hand and then paste the position. There it is. That's a little bit more accurate. So now we have colliders on both sides. And you want to add these colliders whenever you want to strike the player, or you want to create a sword. You put a sword in the character's hand. You put a collider right on the sword. The bones of the sword is what you want to focus on, not the sword itself. Okay, so now that we have those, we have colliders. Let's save. And if we watch the animation, let's watch the animation for a second to see what it does with the colliders. So if I look at the scene, you can see that the hand is positioned in the right, the collider is in the right position, right? And if I switch the animations from this, as an example, let's switch it to walking, right? And I go back to the collider. We can see that the collider again kind of is okay. It's kind of okay. I'm just pointing it out there because this is the stuff that we have to adjust when it comes to how big it's going to be and stuff, right? And especially when it comes to punching, right? So take a look at this hand here. So this hand is the left hand. It's kind of sticking out a little bit too much because we really want it to be in place where it's punching, right? So we can even probably be smaller than this. We're going to adjust it in play. We're going to pause it and adjust it, right? And especially when we go into the punching aspect, which is 3. Let's take a look and see what that looks like, right? So pretty big in terms of our block, our guard. We could theoretically move down the wrist a little bit more, move it back. That's one way we could do it. Because when we look at the right hand, it's pretty out there, right? Take a look, right? So that's where the hand is going to be, as an example. And what I want to do, it's aligned with the bone right now. What I want to do is push it back to here about like this, and even rotate it a little bit more, right? So that when it's when it's kind of aligned, it's kind of where it should be, like something that looks like this, right? That makes more sense. That's where it's going to be when it's kind of charging at us. A little bit better in terms of position, right? And that's the right hand. What about the left hand? The left hand is kind of similar, right? Where we can adjust, we can make some micro adjustments to this. We can bring it down, and then so that is the top, and we can rotate it again, right? We can rotate it so that it looks kind of where it should be on the hand. And it's a lot better than what it was before. Again, you can be really super accurate with this thing if you want to. I'm not going to. And if you were to continue, you can see now that it's a lot better than what it was before. Take a look. Okay. I want to capture these positions, right? So especially on the right hand, because the right hand is the one that's going to hit me. The left hand is really blocking, but we can see where this is. So I want to copy this component. You can do that. So you copy as an example, and I want to copy the component itself, everything, right? And again, there's a couple things to do. Um, you can pull off a notepad if you want, right? I like to do that because, as an example, and we can paste, the component will actually paste in here. That's the vector, but it only pastes one thing at a time. So you could paste each part of it, like the position, the rotation, and the scale. We need to do this for the left hand, or we can go back and adjust it again. So for now, let's just do one hand at a time. Let's grab the right hand. And again, like I said, copy the component, stop the game, and then in the right hand, we can paste as values, which is going to push this where it's supposed to be. Okay. And then when we run it again, and we can check it to see if it worked. So press 3 and go back in there. You can see, yes, it's pretty good. But now the left hand needs to be adjusted. And again, we can just go back and adjust it again like we did before. So pull this back, rotate it, pull it over, right? So you can be more accurate in what you're doing. And now we can grab this one, copy component, stop the game, go back to the left-hand collider and paste component values. And that's going to be more accurate. And we'll run it one more time, and we're going to see that that looks way better than it did before, right, in terms of the way it looks. Again, it's not perfect. I think there's a lot more accuracy you can go with. You can put, you know, the colliders in the exact spot you want. You can scale them so they're a lot better, but I think this is really much better than what we had before. Way more accurate. All right, so now, well, just in case, Herman, in case we want to switch it, what if we have another animation in the future, right, where he punches with his left hand too, like a 1-2 punch, right? So that's why I did it. Not because we need it. We don't really need it. You're right. So file, save project. Let's get out of there and put this up online. So again, just like before, I'm just going to go into GitHub Desktop and say something like added colliders. Commit to main and push to origin. Okay, let's go back in. So what about questions, comments so far for now? What are your thoughts, guys? Exactly. We're going to definitely use the collider to damage the player. So do we want to ignore on the collision matrix for those colliders? The ones that are colliding with themselves? Absolutely. Because you're going to have things colliding with each other. Like, for example, the body is going to collide with other parts of it. And yes, absolutely. We don't want this thing to collide with itself. We're going to get to that. All right, so cool. So we've got this guy, and I want him to run around now. We've got his colliders. In order for them to run around, we want to attach the enemy controller. So let's go back to the Liftoff. And remember, we can just attach the enemy controller where we want. Let's attach it to the outside. There we go. And the enemy controller needs the player. So that's something that it needs. And the enemy controller also needs to have a nav mesh agent. That's what it has to have as well. So first, let's get the player. And the enemy controller itself, we can make a require script. We can say something like, let's require component type of nav mesh agent, right? And when we do that and we save and go back out, then what we should do is we should have the nav mesh agent component attached to this when we run it for the first time. As soon as we run it, it's going to add the nav mesh agent component. There we go. And it's going to kind of run at us and sit idle, right? It kind of worked. All right, couple things. Stopping distance we want to set to 2. We also want to move this down, move down. All right, so we want the enemy controller down here, and we want the nav mesh agent up here. Let's try that again, and let's see if it stops us, stops in front of us as opposed to stops, you know, kind of behind us. There it is. So it stopped there. And as soon as it comes near us, what we want is for this thing to start attacking us. All right, so let's see if it finds us again. There it is. It kind of slides. So that's something that we want. We want to make so that the animator script, right, it's going to change the animation based on the distance. All right, so let's do that. So save. And what we're going to do now is I want to go into the into Liftoff and look inside their animator, which is here. Let's double click again, going back in here. We don't care about all this, right? This is just for testing. So we tested it nice. And what we want to say is by default, we want the animation to be the walk animation. He's going to walk towards us every single time, right? And he's going to punch when he's close. Okay, so that means that if I go back to the into here, again, the idle was just for us for testing. Then what we want to go into the animation or into the animator, right? And instead of making, we could, right now the animation state is 0, right? We can just set the animation state to whatever we want. For example, 1. I want to make it so it's walking all the time by default, right? So if I did that, then it's walking towards you all the time. Very angrily. Okay. And it's stopping at like 2 meters away or whatever. And when I get close, I want this to punch the player, right? So that's what I want it to do. So again, back into the animator, I want to say that if the distance between the object and the player, if the distance between those two things is close, then I want them to, you know, stop. One thing we want to get a reference of is the enemy controller. I want to have access to the enemy controller. And the enemy controller right now is in the parent, right? So it's not sitting here on the body, it's here on the parent. That's where the enemy controller is. So the way to do that is to say something like in the thing, I'm going to say that we'll say private, and we'll get this, we'll have this is the transform that I want. But we want the enemy controller itself. So enemy controller, call it controller, right? And we'll say that controller is equal to transform.parent.getComponent and then enemy controller. So that's what we'll get the controller from the parent. We'll also set up a private transform just to make it an alias, but we'll call it the player. Okay, and we'll say that the player is actually equal to the controller.player.transform. All right, so that's what we want. I think that is the player a transform already? It is. Let's just say the player. So this gives us access to the player transform itself, right? And we also want the controller. So the controller is the thing that's going to tell us the distance between the player, right, as an example, as well as the distance where we are. So we can say if the distance between the player object, player.position, and us, which is my transform.position, right? If the distance is less than, like we said, something like 2.1, which is, we said the stopping distance was something like 2, right? Again, we're just hard coding this, but we can actually put this in the inspector if we want. Then we want the animator to set integer, like we said before, to animation state we want to make it go to punching, which is 3, 2. I'll be okay. So this is punch if close. Okay, so that's what it's going to do. Let's see how this works and if it does. So going back to this. Yep. And run it. And when it's close, it's going to punch, but it's punching way over there. It should really punch and face me where I am. If I go by it, right, as an example, you see that it stopped me, but if I go by it, it's okay. But what if I'm over here? It's not always exactly, I can go right behind it because I'm still close, right? And I can go right next to it, but it's going to punch away from me. And that's not what I want. So what I want is a little piece of script to change its direction so that it's looking at me as opposed to, away from me. Okay, does that make sense? And it was kind of given to us earlier from another student. They kind of said, hey, listen, this might be a better way to do it. And I was like, cool, give it to me. I'm always good with solutions. So it wasn't my solution, it was Chi-Chi's solution. So I'm totally fine with that. And it's in the animator controller. So this little, the Liftoff Animator area. And what we thought about is like, well, okay, so we're close, right? So only when we're close, what we want to do is we definitely want this animator state to happen. But what if we're not close? Well, if we're not close, then we want the animation state to go back to walking, right? Now, again, you might think about the ternary operator here, but we're going to do other things as well, right? So walk if not close. That's what we're doing. Walk if not close, punch if close. But we also want to turn. So we want to turn to face the player, right? That's what we want if we're close, because otherwise it doesn't look good. So we're going to do this. We're going to say vector3, and we'll say that the target position is equal to a new vector3 object that's going to take the player transform.position.x and the transform.position.y, right? So again, a new vector3 with the player's x and z, but your y. All right, that's what it's going to do. So transform.position.z. This will be the player.z, player position.z. Right, so that's the target position. So we only care about the, I'm just going to hide this so you can see it. There we go. So target position is a new vector, right, where you're taking the player's transform position.x and the player's position.y. I think we don't need transform because player is a transform, right? And then once we've done that, then we want to say that I want to transform.look at the target position. Okay, so that's turn to face the player, and then punch. Okay, and we only want to turn to face the player when we're close. Okay, let's try this out and see what happens. We may make some adjustments and run it. So boom, he's facing the player. They're going to face the player. They're going to face the player. And no matter where I go, they're going to try and face me and all that stuff. Pretty good. Okay. And that is our little animation change. That's pretty cool. What I want now is if I get hit by the enemy, this guy here, I take damage. We already have that script in the player. So in the player behavior, if we look there on the bottom, we're using a on trigger enter, right? And we're saying that, well, if your other game object compare tag is the hazard, then take damage. But what about if the other .game object .compare tag was not the hazard, but let's say, for example, our enemy, we don't have a tag that's the enemy, but let's suppose we did. Then we could also take other damage, where I can say that the UI controller dot take damage, and we'll use it at 5. I thought 10 was a little bit too much today when I did it. So something like 5. We don't have an enemy tag, so let's add that into the to our object, right? So again, going back to the scene and going to Liftoff. Now we have to be selective. So where do we want the compare tag to be? It has to be wherever the bounding box for the collider is. That's an important piece. So again, we're going to go into those areas. And what I want is for the left hand and the right hand for this collider area right here to be tagged. So I want to go add tag. We're going to make that the enemy. And we want to, when the enemy is hitting, let's go to the left hand and assign that tag to the left hand. When the enemy is hitting, then we're going to take damage. And I'll do it to both hands, just in case I want to change that later on. So those hands hit me, I'm going to take damage. That's the idea behind it. Let's try that out and see if it works. So bam, bam. Now you see I'm taking damage a couple times because I'm penetrating. It's kind of hitting me a couple times. It's not going to just hit me once. I'm like hitting, and then as I get hit, I keeps on taking damage as I go, right? So that's the way it can work, right? In terms of you're specifying where you're taking the damage. Again, you can tweak it a little bit. Yes, if the box is too big, I'm going to get both the left hand and the right hand happening, right? So, again, is if you're rubbing against me, if I'm too close, then that's when it's going to happen, when I'm taking that damage, right? But again, you can adjust those numbers for yourself to make it so that's more accurate. They need a little bit of adjustment. For sure, everything needs adjustment, okay? Other things we want to do before we make this into a prefab is I want to grab that enemy. So go to the prefabs and the robot prefab that we have in here already. Let's just pull them in there. Here's a robot prefab. The robot prefab has an enemy marker. I'm just going to Control D and double, kind of create a duplicate and put it on top of Liftoff there. And then what I want to do with this enemy marker here is I want to change the positions so that the position is 0, 0, 0. Well, 0, 0 here anyway. So 0, thank you, 0, and 2.134 is okay, but I probably want to put it a little bit higher up. There is the enemy marker, so we can actually see the enemy in the screen. What I want to do is for the enemy marker, this is the marker. Again, I don't want to see markers when I'm in the editor, so I can turn those off. I don't see the marker. In the minimap, one thing we also want to make sure in the minimap camera, remember that we have a couple of things here. And one of them is the camera itself. The minimap camera is a lot of times for rendering, the culling mask is mixed, so it's not going to see the enemy right now, okay? And there is only, we're not part of that layer, and so what I want is for the Liftoff character also to be part of the enemy layer, right? It's going to ask me, do I want all of his children? The answer is Yes, but then I want to change the marker back to a marker. So let's get rid of this. Could have done it in a different order. And I want to go back to Liftoff, hit the marker, which is this thing, and then set that to a marker. There we go. And now we can take Liftoff and pull them into the prefabs folder, which is what I want. And we have our new enemy. So if I run it now, we should be able to see the enemy coming at us, right? So we can see the enemy's chasing us on the mini map, right? And whenever they get to us, right, if they do, there he is, he's coming over and he's just going to whack us. Okay, so kind of fun. So again, some slidey feet. One thing to notice is the feet are a little bit slidey. So either you have to speed up the animation or slow down the speed. Okay, so that's something to think about. And you can tweak that a little bit. So let's say, for example, we think it's too fast. Let's move it down to 2. Let's see how that looks. Is this too fast or too slow? Let's see what that looks like. And maybe we need to go faster, right? So if it's slidey, that means it's not moving fast enough. Take a look. Also notice that it's kind of hovering above the ground when it's moving. I'm not liking that too much. And that's because of our enemy controller, the nav mesh agent that's on it, right? Again, we can make it a little better. I think the speed is probably about right now, too. But I would probably go back to Liftoff and take a look at that nav mesh agent, because that's going to make him float off the ground. Let's also look and see where he's positioned. He's on the ground, but the nav mesh agent is going to make him kind of hover a little bit bigger, this thing here. So again, there's things you can do to bring him lower to the ground to make him so it's less slidey. But again, it has to do with working out this size of his bounding area. So the nav mesh agent itself, like we said, has a radius and a height, right? So what you can do is you can make the height a little bit less than 2. You can make something like 1.9, you know, as an example. And then what you want to do is the base offset, you can move up a little bit. So you can move the base offset just up just a touch so that it's just slightly above the ground. There. And that should push him down just a bit. Let's see. Still slidey, but it looks like his feet are on the ground now compared to what he was before. Now, what happens if he can't get into me, like can't get close enough to me? He's going to keep on trying to get closer, right? Which is okay. Again, these are all little tweaks you can make. I'm a little bit far now. Take a look. So here I'm okay. What about here? It's going to miss me, and I'm just slightly out of range when it comes to stuff. So maybe like 2 is too far now, you know, compared to where I want to be. Like he's kind of a little bit too far. So again, it really depends on these values, right? What I put in here. Stopping distance is 2. Let's make the stopping distance 1.8, right? So that's he's going to get a little closer. And let's try that. Much better. Now, again, if you want it even closer, so you see his fist come into your face, you can again adjust it even more. So 1.8, oops, undo. Our stopping distance is, let's say, 1.7, and we'll see if that works a little better. We've slowed him down, that's why it's like that. He'll stop on a dime now compared to what he did before. A little closer. I think even a little closer than that. So something like 1.6. Now it's a little bit too close. And the reason we can tell it's too close is because that arm again, the left arm is hitting us because it's got a big box that's on us. But it's probably about right. We have to reduce the size of the box. The box is on his left arm. All right, so not bad. I mean, again, we can continue tweaking all afternoon if we want to, but I think you get the idea, right? So these things have to be made smaller. The smaller and more, the closer they fit the hand, the better, right? The challenge with exactly matching the hand is that, again, you want to match it in action, not in T-pose. In T-pose, it looks okay, but when it's actually curled, then that's when you actually want to get it, all right? All right, so let's update that, the overrides for the prefab, right? That's that prefab, save. And now let's build for mobile, and that's the last bit. So build settings, switch to Android. And I'll put the lab report later today. And it's going to say all these same things that we've done already. So if you follow along, you're good to go. You just have to make a little video with the lab report and you're good. And the reason why I'm building it for mobile is to see what it looks like, how it feels in mobile. Does it do what it's supposed to do? Does it push me back? One thing that we didn't also talk about too much is the physics piece, right? Does it actually hit me or do anything to me, or push you back a little bit when it hits you? And when it does, he should move forward as well. What about if you move towards him, right? If you move too close, then he should move back, right? He should step back too. There's animations for those things. We can actually, kind of do something where he's a lot closer. And, again, you can stop the nav mesh and worry about when he's close enough that he's actually going to hit you. So you don't have to use the nav mesh all the time. The nav mesh agent is there for him to come close enough to start doing things to you, right? And then you can take over with your own script. All right, let's go into player settings and let's change this to lab 7. All right. And again, just change this to lab 7 from a build perspective. Okay. And I want to go back to, I want to launch LD player at this point. Let's launch LD player. And what we want to do is with LD player, make sure that I'm just going to wipe away any of the other apps that are out there right now, just because I only want to test one at a time. Taking its time. So that's the one from this morning. Let's just move that into the trash so it doesn't clash with this one. And now that LD player is running, let's refresh the devices. And we'll assign the device that we see, which is the simulator. And then we'll do a build and run. And when we do a build and run, we'll go into the builds folder. And inside the builds folder, we'll build our lab 7 APK. Again, you can call this whatever you like. I'm just calling it lab 7. Here, do that. And let's let it build. Okay, so it failed. So why did it fail? That's the thing to note. So it says Unity player, 4 errors. So what happened? Why did it fail? So this happens sometimes. It didn't happen this morning. But what happened? It says array type mismatch. Attempt to access an element as a type incompatible array. So what is it talking about? And guys, I'll tell you that I had no issues this morning, and now I'm getting this issue. Are you guys getting this issue? Maybe. This is before I even get to run it. Switching to Android. Let's just go back to player settings and see if there's something different on yours than on what we had there. So I don't want to do auto graphics API. I want to turn that off. Typically, we don't want that. And let me just make sure that everything else is set up properly here on the settings. Weird. That's the first time I've seen that in a long time. We may just have to rebuild or restart Unity. Sometimes that's the way it goes, but otherwise there shouldn't be anything that stops it. We haven't done anything that's wacky like that. GUI utility process event, and it says editor build player window build method execution 4 errors. Just going to take a look at these errors. I'm glad that yours worked. That means that it's just me. I'd rather have it me than you. Int pointer and boolean. Okay, what I'm going to do, and this works a lot, believe it or not, is I want to clear this. Thank you very much. And I want to save project, and I want to close Unity down. Let's put this up on GitHub. So yeah, because I find that when I don't do this, sometimes bad things happen. So let's say added, what we did was we added enemy marker and damage, right? So we're going to say commit to main, and we'll push it up. So this kind of does most of it. And we'll get back into there, and hopefully that'll solve our problems. Believe it or not, sometimes just relaunching Unity restarts the whole process, and we should be good to go. How about you guys? Anyone else have any issues? I know that Liam, you were good. How about Herman or Mandeep or Michael? Were you guys able to build? You're still building? Okay. Couple things I also have a problem with is the ground. Take a look at that ground. That is weird now. Before it wasn't like this, and now suddenly it's become black. This comes back to what I said before with this weird gravel cobble texture. That could be the issue as well. So notice that the textures itself, where I have my gravel cobble texture, is not converted to a normal map again. That's weird, man. Let's say goodbye to this one. Goodbye texture. Yeah. And in my, going back to my materials for gravel cobble grounds, let's just make sure that this is just a render unlit material, a lit material. And yeah, we're going to leave it as is. Right? So I don't want anything like that in there. That could have been the issue, honestly. Sometimes materials and textures and those kind of things, it doesn't know what the problem is. Yep, I know, it was fine with me too. So file save project. Let's do a build and run. So let's see if this one's going to build this time around. Now, I'm watching this part too, because this is the part that gives us some hints on what was the problem. Okay. And if it craps out early, that means it's something else. It has nothing to do with the texture. It's something else. But guys, I have a feeling, I'm telling you, that texture was corrupt. Here it is. Let's see. Bokeh. It does a bunch of stuff. It's changing the universal render pipeline. Second, and then we'll be done for the day. Thank you. Let's see what happens. It looks like it's a lot better already, to be honest. Because before, it would always get stopped before. So I'm telling you, texture is the thing. Textures are one of the biggest causes of breakdowns for conversions, and also not just that, but also they're very big. Sometimes when the conversion process takes hold, they become something that's either unreadable or unrecognizable by Unity. It doesn't know what to do with it, and when it doesn't know what to do with it, it just craps out. And that's what happened just now. I'm telling you, that's why it looked really weird. The ground looked weird. Something was wrong with that texture when we converted it to a normal map. It didn't work properly. It could have been even when we saved. We didn't really save properly. But we'll see now. We see this is going to build. No problem. And all I did was I restarted Unity and I removed that texture. That's it. Those are the two things I did. Getting much closer to for the. Okay, how about Herman now, Mandeep, and Michael? Are you guys built? Did you guys get yours built? So it's one thing to make a model, still build it. I know, I'm in the same boat as you, Herman. Don't worry. It's one thing to make a model and do the animations and everything and rig it, and then you go and try it on your emulator or even on the phone, and it doesn't work, right? So don't be upset about it. There's reasons why it's not converting. It could be that the model is broken. That's part of what it is. The mesh is disconnected somewhere or whatever. I'm telling you, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to convert to OpenGLES, right? Which is what's running on a phone a lot of times, not Vulkan. And when it's trying to run, it's trying to interpret every vertex, right? And trying to attach all the information. Now, typically, if it's running in Unity, you have nothing to worry about, typically. But look at that, it broke. And it broke from a texture, right? Or maybe it broke because my Unity needed to be rebooted. There's a bunch of things that can happen. So don't panic. Remember, we can always go back and regenerate this stuff. It's part of the whole process, okay? But you can see how long it's taking for me too. Almost done. Using the NDK now. Okay. When I go to post generate, that means I'm pretty confident it's going to finish at this point. But what a process. How long does it take, man? It's like almost 5 minutes between builds. Can you imagine if you were doing like building all day long? That's all you were doing, working all day, adding something. 5 minutes between builds, you can go have a coffee and come back. Right? And this is with a pretty decent machine. My machine isn't bad, right? It's, like I said, good GPU, good CPU, right? So that's a long time. All right, so we're going to ignore this and we're going to get into what this looks like. And let's take a look. And yeah, look, I'm getting damaged already. And he looks pretty ugly too. Let's run away and let's put the mini map on. Oh yeah, he's hitting me from behind too. Ugh. Run away, run away. I want to be hurt by this guy. Oof, I ran away successfully. Right? Well, there he is. He's coming. He's walking along. He's pretty confident he's going to get me. I don't like the angle that he's walking. That was weird. And he's just going to pound me over and over again. All right. It works. That's what I wanted to see. Thank you very much, LD player. And again, some issues. Definitely had more issues this time around than the morning. And it could have been a bunch of stuff. Could have been the way I converted the model or whatever. But for the most part, it's okay. It's not terrible, right? Things that you can still do to make this even more pronounced. I like outline shaders. Outline shaders are really great, even if it's kind of a strong outline, so you can see the character. That's pretty good. A better model might be good too. A model that is not going to deform with the armor. The armor is on top of the armor of the body as almost like a shell. That might be better than what this looks like right now. So lots and lots of stuff that we can do to improve this as it goes. Let's see what we got here. lock access. And that's what you did for your rotation, right? You did alert. That's good. I like that alert. It's nice. That's good. I like it, Liam. Yep. Yeah. That's definitely better because otherwise the whole body's going to shift, like you said. It's excellent. Otherwise, guys, that's it. This is good enough for what I'm asking for. I think it's going to give you a lot of good, um, good, uh, kind of points where you can create your own stuff. Again, we're using an organic model. The model's not ours. The rig is not ours, right? And we're using We're using kind of animations that are performance capture that are not ours either. So we're creating a prototype, and we're checking it out and see how it feels in our game, right? Whether you're making it for a 3D game, whether you're doing it for a mobile game, it doesn't really matter. They can look really great, and it can, for very little cost, like you saw. Is it perfect? No, but it doesn't mean that we can't improve it and we can't tweak it. All right, so that's where we are today, and that's it for this week. We'll get back together next week with more on mobile game dev. All right, thanks so much, guys. I'm going to stop now recording, and we'll go back to any questions you might have. All right, thanks so much, guys.